Welcome, slayers of giants, to Tilting at Windmills.
I am Chrys Gorman, the Executive Merchandising Director at NotAPipePublishing.
And I'm Benjamin Gorman, publisher at NotAPipePublishing, and we are here with today's guest, Trevor Harrison. Trevor Harrison is a retired political sociologist, author of 16 books, 3 of them poetry, traveler to many countries, and frequent commentator on things political and otherwise. So, Trevor, very glad to have you here today from lovely Alberta.
Welcome.
Very happy to be here.
Trevor, where are you calling in from? Where are you located?
Where I am is the city of Lethbridge. That's where I actually taught for some years at the university here. And we're about 60 miles north of the American border.
Okay.
We wish we were a little farther away.
Yeah, I was gonna say, right now. Yeah, I went to Alberta as a kid, did the kind of Banff Calgary trip.
Right.
Beautiful country up there. We were there, I believe, when is the Stampede? Is that in the fall? And
It's in no, it's in August, early
okay.
August, I
Yeah,
think.
so we were there late summer, yeah, and it was
Yeah.
just gorgeous. And then Banff, I will never forget. That's just one of the most beautiful places in the world. So
We are truly blessed to have it. And one of the things when you're in a place for a long time, you start to just kind of ignore it. You just
yeah.
kind of go by it and you don't notice it. But when visitors come and they point it out, then we say, "Oh, right, that is pretty special."
Oh yeah. I mean, just yeah, that's someplace I would love to take you at some point. Banff is just this beautiful national park in Alberta.
Mm.
Unfortunately, like so many places around the world, though, tourism is starting to kill the golden goose. That it's
Mm,
now just so crowded, and you can't see the mountains now for the chalets that have been built up. So yeah, it's
yes.
the pros and cons of travel. So
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. When I was there, it was, we were tent camping and that was it. There were no shower. I mean, not that I recall. It was tent camping and, a few cabins and that was
yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly.
Sorry, the dogs have decided they need to be on our feet as much as
Trevor
they
couldn't get
possibly
he
can to
couldn't get
feel
under the
connected.
he
Yeah.
couldn't get under the desk, so it was in his way. So
And
Um,
and where am I talking to you from?
so we're in Barcelona, Spain. We moved
Oh,
here.
right. Yes, you did
Yeah.
tell me.
Yeah, we moved
Yes.
here in January, just before the inauguration of Donald Trump. We said we are getting out of there. So this has been, a very intentional choice to be speaking about what's going on in the world from a place where we can do so freely. And yeah, we love Barcelona, but I miss the green and I miss it is far too hot in the summer for my taste. It is.
It Southern Europe has been burning up. I know the last
Yeah.
few years. We were in Spain a couple of years ago now, and we first landed in Madrid. And it was already getting warm. It was late September,
Yeah.
and it just kept getting hotter after that.
Yeah.
Just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
part of our decision making to not move to Madrid is it gets so hot in the summer. And, so Barcelona at least is coastal, so it's got that kind of, moderating effect. But yeah, it
yeah.
still was a couple of weeks of just miserable, and our air conditioning went out this summer. And so that was an unpleasant couple of weeks. I basically flipped my schedule so that I was, waking up when the sun went down and working all night. It was totally backwards, but that was the only way I could feel productive because when it gets too
As a
hot.
little side note about Barcelona, I don't know if you've heard his music, but Jackson Brown brought out a album a couple of years ago, just actually before we were going. And one of the songs on there is about Barcelona. Apparently, he spends time in Spain, and absolutely
Oh,
loves the city. It's a fabulous song about it, and of course in my book actually right there. I actually have a section talking about Spain, traveling through there when I was like 20 or so, and talk about events in Barcelona. So, yeah, it's a great city. I love it. But I know Barcelonians also aren't too crazy about tourists anymore.
oh yeah, they're
Way too
and
many.
so we have to kind of, we feel obligated to say to people, we live here. This is permanent. We are not tourists.
Yeah.
And so
And
because
there is a difference.
are
Yeah.
overwhelmed by the number of tourists. That is certainly
Yeah.
an issue in the city. And, they're very kind. Like we've not faced, you know, overt hostility, but their concerns are entirely reasonable. There is not the housing. Like they just need to build a ton of housing if we're going to have all these tourists. So, yeah.
And one of the things I've noticed actually traveling over the years, and I've been to Greece a number of times, is how especially tourists with lots and lots of money and everything caters to the people actually living in a place can't afford it. So the
Yes.
cost of everything skyrockets, and so unless you're tied up in the tourist industry, you're left way behind.
And that's what's happening. Wages are not keeping pace with costs because the
Yeah,
costs are targeted at tourists and the wages are not. And so that certainly has been an issue. Although we're learning when you live in a place, we're learning about the complexity. There's a lot of very old money here. And so there's
mhm.
a real income inequality that Barcelona needs to, that Spain in general, but especially Catalonia needs to deal with because there's a lot of wealth and this is normal and global. Very wealthy people are saying, please look at the immigrants and the tourists as the sources of all your ills. Please don't look at us. And so there's
That sounds
that,
familiar.
yeah, right. So that there's certainly that kind of it's they market it as populism, but it's not populism. It's let's deceive 51% of the populace into being opposed to immigration. Really, it is for the benefit of very few people. So that
Yes.
that has been, and we as guests are not trying to get involved in Spanish politics. Like we have no moral standing coming
Yeah.
from where we're coming from. We're commenting on what's going on back in the United States far more often than we should be commenting on what's going on in here in Spain. But
Yeah.
um,
Well, as someone said some years ago, I think it's accurate about politics today. The right is very good at telling people to punch down as opposed to punching up. And so the whole thing about people who are doing this, that, or the other, immigrants particularly, or various races, that's a typical
yeah,
right-wing trope. So
yep. I mean, it's the classic fascist playbook, and I was really struck by some of the similarities are you know you find yourself stretching, and then some of
yeah.
them are so on their face, you're like, this is the exact same playbook. And so I didn't realize that one of the things that happened in the Third Reich was to build a big ballroom and build a bunker underneath. And I'm going, oh, that is, that's not even subtle at this point. Hey, let's
Mhm.
build a ballroom. Like that's exactly what they're doing. And so that
When
is
you
wild
first
to
mentioned
see.
that, you were like, no,
I was
that's
like,
that's
nah.
a crazy
Yeah.
conspiracy theory. It
So
was
Yeah, it's very
peaks ahead
crazy.
of you on that one.
yeah.
I think the
Sounds
more
like
obvious comparison, though, is with Louis the XIV, the aristocracy. It's so much like Versailles. And
Yeah.
I only sort of jokingly said, "Okay, let's bring on the guillotine."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, let's
like,
cover everything in
like
gold.
you just wonder how far this can go.
Yeah. So I want to hear you've got a new short story collection that's coming out. Tell everybody about this and how it came about.
Yeah, well, and I'll even just hold it up for people. They can
Yes.
see the cover here. There's an interesting story actually about the cover itself we can get into later. But how it came about was actually I was in the course of putting together a different book, which should be out very shortly here about my travels across what's called as the hippie trail back in the mid 70s and through Afghanistan. And of course, everything's fallen apart since. But in the course of doing that, I was noting that I'd collected a whole bunch of notes, not really a diary, but just notes of travel earlier. And I end up putting them together in this book, a series of kind of short stories. They're not fictional. I had extremely good notes about these places. I approached my editor, who did it, Ed Willett, at Endless Skies Publishing. I sent it to him and I said, I think there's a book here. And he agreed. And so he brought out this book earlier this year. And it's been a fun ride since talking to people everywhere about the book.
So it's nonfiction short stories about your travels.
Yeah, it's over a series of years, actually. So some of the stories, as I was mentioning to you before we went on air here, is is actually about Barcelona and travels through Spain and also the Canary Islands when I was in my early 20s. And from there, it actually goes on to talk a little bit about later travels in Greece and some trips later on again into a somewhat still unventured part of India, Ladakh, which is way up in the north, just bordering on Tibet. And so it's a series of things. In some ways, it's kind of a memoir of being in your 20s and the things you do. I also have sections there about what really horrible jobs I did
Yeah.
that we all do in your 20s. And it's a lot of it is really before I went to university and eventually ended up with an academic career.
And do you find that the stories overall have an arc, or are they, pretty self-contained?
The stories themselves are quite self-contained. So someone could say, "Oh, I think I'll just read one. It's kind of like a little soundbite here. I don't need to have read the others as a preamble." But as a whole, they're actually, in some sense, the arc is really a story of my life. Growing up from growing in a small city at that time, growing up and leaving home, not actually having completed education at all. And then the things I did afterwards, hitchhiking, traveling here and there, and as I said, working at not the greatest of jobs. So the arc is really of my life up to about the age of 30.
So I'm imagining, sorry, I feel like I'm dominating here, but I'm really curious about this. How did that experience inform your I mean, I'm thinking as a teacher myself. How did that inform your teaching over the course of your career, having seen parts of the world that were, culturally very different, politically very different?
Yeah, I think it did impact me a great deal. And in fact, I think one of the tragedies of modern life is even though people travel a lot, I don't think they actually really travel in a complete sense that they don't really experience where they go. We tend to end up in little resorts or something. Much of my writing and my academic work afterwards has certainly been influenced by going to different countries, seeing the way that different countries have been formed, the political economy of places. You start to learn things like imperialism and colonialism when you travel to many of these places. You say, I understand why these people might be a little bit angry about how their lives have been transported, changed over the last 150, 200 years. I've actually written a fair amount, for example, about places like Iran and the Middle East and everything that has transpired there in the last number of decades. So my travels certainly have influenced me a good deal. And this is many of these short stories here. I'll give you one example. Said I wrote about traveling in Spain, and then when I was in my 20s, Francisco Franco was still dictator there at that time. And I remember the quite tangible fear that people had of the Guardia Civil, and perhaps maybe still today. But it was a very different place when you're going around past buildings where you can still see the bullet holes from the Spanish Civil War. So those things have to impact you. And I think one of the great things about travel is it takes you out of your small environment that you've grown up in, which for me in Canada was a pretty small place. And it made me a much broader person, I think, in my teaching and my writing afterwards.
You would be really struck if you were here by the interaction people have on the street with the police. And I think there's a real consciousness that the Guardia, was a source of danger and are day in, day out proving that they are serving the public. I don't know if I'm,
It's no, it's a bit shocking.
it really is. They are wonderful. Like
Yeah,
they're wonderful and also very hands off. Like
yeah,
very intentionally,
yeah,
are we protecting this person's dignity who is having
yeah,
a mental health struggle or who is, kind of blackout drunk
yeah,
teenage tourist in the street or whatever? And other than that, like we've seen in the 6 months we've lived here, more than that, 8 months we've lived here, I think I've seen one arrest
yeah.
they just don't do that here. And I think it is that historical, we don't want to be feared by the public anymore. So it's very different from us, for us coming from the United States, where the police have to live with the knowledge at every turn that the person they're interacting with may or may not be armed. And so they're constantly asserting their authority. And
Yeah.
here the police are going, hey, we're just here to help and we can leave. Like it's a very different attitude.
I had what yesterday? There was a knock on the front door, and so we live in an apartment complex, and several of the other apartments are being run as Airbnbs. And there's a knock on the door. I open it, and there was two police officers outside. And like I'm just now getting to the point where the first response isn't fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even as a law-abiding citizen, it's still interacting with law enforcement. That first response is fear. And they were like, does this name live here? And I was like, no. He's like, is this an Airbnb? I was like, no. And he's like, okay, have a great day. And I was like,
Yeah.
thanks.
Well, I can sort of second that because I was in Spain 2 years ago, and I was actually struck also that the interactions seemed much different than I
Yeah,
remember back in the early 70s. And conversely, actually, my experience going to the States on occasions is there is a kind of wall between policing and the public. Both sides are actually quite fearful of what might happen.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine now, because I do not travel down to the States now, but I think the enforcement by ICE and other organizations in the States now reminds me much more of the interactions that I would have seen back in Spain in the 1970s.
Yeah, which I
well,
think is an important thing for people to hear. Like that is where we've gone to. It's, those folks who are experiencing it are experiencing the kind of frog in hot water myth.
yeah,
That it's this is getting worse day by day. But if you're further away, you can go, this is dramatic.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the power dynamic has within the
Yeah.
US between, in the last, what, 50 years, between the law enforcement, the justice system in general, and the public, the power dynamic has been so skewed to the justice system,
Yeah.
that it is, it's no wonder that, I mean, I've already told the story about trying to explain to one of my students why I
Yeah.
wouldn't call the police on a
Yeah.
person of color. And that was a whole conversation. And it's just something it's a notion that is so foreign over here.
Yeah. Why didn't you call the police for help?
Yeah.
Because we don't do that. We're
Yeah.
Americans, and that leads to people dying.
Well, and I wouldn't put somebody in danger,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, if you are not actively harming somebody, I didn't see it.
Obviously a lot of things going on in the United States, and but one of the things, actually, my early work as an academic, I was a criminologist, and the one of the things that is talked about there a lot is the value of community policing. The police not as kind of a foreign invader that comes into your place when there's a problem, but they actually live in the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as opposed to kind of the professionalization of policing, where the police are kind of external to everything. I lived actually and worked in Japan for 4 months, also a number of years ago. And policing in Japan is very much that community policing thing. The police are there as your friends. They walk around in your neighborhood, and there's no sense of fear from the police. Whereas I think that's really happened in many parts of the United States.
Yeah, well,
Well,
and we had a much better experience in a small town because the community policing is kind of, inescapable.
Part
The
of it.
town is
Yeah.
so small. But in the
Yeah.
big cities, I think it's a function of wealth inequality.
yeah.
If you end
Yeah.
up with such a distance, then, and that distance becomes geographic, then even
Mhm.
though the police want to do community policing and they'll talk about community policing, no police officer wants to live in the neighborhoods they police
Yeah.
if those are very poor neighborhoods and they make a very healthy income as police officers. And so it ends up that, you don't have people who live in the community policing the community because they can afford to leave it.
Well, that and the police officers themselves have become
Yeah.
their own community.
Yeah.
The
Oh, yeah.
police
They,
department.
they kind of bond
Yeah.
together as a group. It's kind of
Yeah.
like we have to, because again,
Yeah.
we're fearful of
What's
this
the,
Yeah.
community.
thin blue line,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think I think that's part of what is happening with ICE right now. That's part of what makes it so horrifying is there is no sense of community
If you're
within
masked
ICE
and, you know,
and coming in from out of town and just yeah, there's no sense of this is my city.
right.
Right.
Um,
No, they truly are viewed as kind of foreign invaders, and they
Mhm.
yeah,
also, like foreign invaders, are fearful of the locals.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that nice
Yeah. Yeah.
light note, we'll shift a little bit. Um, so part of what we're trying to do now, part of what I'm trying to do is there's so much darkness, and so it's highlighting the good. So it's important to point out the bad, but also remind people that there is kindness, there's good still in small acts, essentially.
Mhm.
So I would like to ask, what is the kindest thing you've seen somebody do?
Kind of thing. One of the things I write about in the book, and it came out of when I was in Ladakh, and actually I think it was probably going through Darjeeling. Uh, there was a gentleman on the street who suddenly had an attack. I suspect he had maybe was prone to seizures, and he was carrying a lot of wood and everything on his back, and he suddenly just fell over, crippled by one of these. And everybody so kindly came over and just, didn't move him out of the way. They just took care of him while he was having the seizure. They picked up everything he had dropped. And it reminded me, even in a place that I was a stranger to, how kindness does kind of spread across people. And if you look around, I think you're right, Chris. It's very easy to fall into the kind of darkness we see right now. But every day there's kind of small little incidents where you see somebody being very kind to elderly people, children, just commonly on the street. So such a common thing is, for example, in Canada, we joke about it, but someone holding the door open for someone.
Yeah.
I think we too easily dismiss that as okay, well, but it is actually a communication going on there, that this is a sign of decency. You're acknowledging this other person in your presence. And I think we need to pay attention to those little cues to how we can behave.
Yeah.
When we told people we were moving to Barcelona, and when I tell people I live, in Spain, in Barcelona in particular, in a very touristy location, so often what we hear is like, aren't you afraid of being robbed? And I've heard there's so many pickpockets and like and I'll see these posts about somebody that's like, I visited Barcelona for a week and somebody stole my phone, and like it's become like so hyper what's the word that I'm looking for? Exaggerated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that I noticed, I mean, I'm a woman who exists in society, so I use what is common sense, right? And one of the things that surprised me that I noticed hearing all these people warn about the crime in the area that we live in is that if I am walking down the street and a zipper on my backpack comes open, somebody will inevitably tap me and just let me know your bag is unzipped. If
Yeah.
I'm leaving a store and I haven't zipped my purse up yet, somebody will stop me and just be like, zip that up. And so it's
Yeah.
this weird dichotomy between so much crime, but
Right.
there's not.
Yeah, and our response is, my response, male privilege, acknowledging that, I am not, my safety is not threatened in the same way. But
Yeah,
when I'm looking at just the statistics, this city is so safe, so
yeah,
ridiculously
Yeah.
safe that if your greatest concern is, somebody may put a hand into a bag and pull a phone out, you're living in a pretty darn safe place compared to where we came from. But it is kind, it is nice to see that
Yeah.
kindness.
Yeah. I mean, I experienced more theft owning a business in the United
Oh yeah.
States than
yeah,
I have
Oh yeah.
here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
yeah. My
I,
my saying is, if you haven't had been experienced kind of petty theft while traveling, then you haven't actually been traveling. I mean, I've been robbed. I think a lot of these things are
sorry.
kind of a nuisance, especially if you lose a credit card and you have to cancel it and you have to get a
Right.
new one. But in terms of actually feeling threatened, and again, I've been robbed, particularly in places like Athens. But I've also had people come up and warn me, "Hey, there's pickpockets around here," and I don't worry about my physical safety going through places. It's just kind of a nuisance, and I
Yeah.
Yeah.
really do not fear going into almost any place. As someone traveling or even living in a place, you certainly want to be aware that bad things could happen, but we so over exaggerate it. And I think people who talk about those things, they talk about it because, hey, here was an unusual experience. Let me tell you about it. It's
Right.
kind of almost an exciting story to tell
Yeah.
you. But if you boil it down, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to pay attention to statistics, it's incredibly safe to go through
Yeah.
places throughout Europe and, in fact, lots of parts of the world. I'm about to travel off to Southeast Asia again,
Oh,
second year in a row, to
yeah.
Vietnam. Was there last year with my son and felt incredibly safe through Cambodia, Thailand, all over. Not afraid of going any of these places at all. As I said, I taught criminology, and the one of the rules everywhere, if you want to get in danger, is time and place.
Yeah.
Don't go to certain places at certain times of the day, but otherwise, you're safe to go anywhere.
Yeah. Well, and safety in numbers. I mean, I was just,
Yeah.
it's funny you mentioned that. I was in Laos, Cambodia, Laos, I learned it's not Laos, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam last March. Not
Okay.
this last March, but the March before, and go to crowded places. Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't, which in Southeast Asia is it's not hard to find crowded places. And so yeah, you don't want to be in a dark alley alone, but th those are rare. People
Yeah.
are everywhere. People were incredibly kind. Yeah, that you will have a wonderful time. And this is your second time.
Yeah. And above all, be respectful of the place that you're in. Don't do
Yeah.
things that are, kind of like the ugly foreigner doing really stupid, obnoxious things.
Yeah,
But
Right.
that goes wherever you are.
right.
Try to be kind and respectful
Yeah.
wherever you are, even in your home country.
Yeah, acknowledging we are guests. Like
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
one of the things we kind of remind ourselves. We are guests here.
Yeah.
Well, to move on to a slightly heavier, perhaps, question. What is something you used to believe in that you no longer believe?
Yeah, well, growing up in the 50s, 60s, and it ended some point in there, thinking that the West was this great savior of the world and all kinds of, we were bringing knowledge and wisdom and goodness and democracy to other countries. That fell away from me probably by the time I was even 10 or 12. I was actually reading some pretty heavy stuff, history and politics and stuff, even then. And all of a sudden, things just didn't jive for me.
Yeah.
And the idea that the West, the United States in particular, but in Canada, of course, we were part of the British Empire, and the maps in school were all colored pink, and the British Empire was this great place saving the savages from whatever.
Right.
Well, I that fell away really quickly, and during the course, the assassinations in the States in the 60s, the Vietnam War, and other events after that, I realized this was, to use the academic term, bullshit.
Yeah.
uh, and again, back to, we're talking about my travels. All of my travels reinforced the idea that this was all an illusion, very, very much a lie. And so I've comported myself ever since, and I'm very skeptical about what the isms tell me, whether or not it's communism, capitalism, or statism. The idea that the
Yep.
state is somehow going to save you from things. So
Yeah. I mean, traveling to Cambodia, that hits you in a deeper way, I think, or at least it did for me. Like, the horror that has been inflicted on that nation is
yeah.
so just abominable in a way that there are no words for. And the more I learned about the way the US actively made sure it was as terrible as possible to cut off North Vietnamese supply lines, facilitating genocide consciously. Like, and and that just there's no way to ever come back from that. Like,
Yeah.
you can't go, oh, but other countries that have had genocides, they're the bad ones. Like, no, we did that, and it's horrific. Yeah, once that
I
blows up, you don't go back.
No, you can't. And one of the things I told myself over the years is, as some people want to turn away from horrible things, right? They can't take it, and I understand that. I mean, some things are shocking. They're quite gut wrenching. But I won't do that. As hard as it is, I will walk into that. I will see it. So when we were in Vietnam last year, of course, we went to the famous Hanoi prison, but it was not Hanoi prison before that. It was actually the French prison for Vietnamese. And you come out of there and you say, now I understand why the Vietnamese didn't like the French and wanted them out of here.
Yeah.
Because and so they learn things from the French. And then you go to Cambodia and you go through the prison fields, the killing fields, which there were over 300 killing fields. People don't realize that. They were all over the place. But again, these techniques were actually being taught by people coming in.
Right.
It's kind of like Abu Ghraib during the Iraq occupation. Where did they learn all these techniques of torture?
Yep.
Anyway, so on and on. So I will not avert my eyes from what's going on. As brutal as it is, it doesn't leave me unmoved. In fact, I've been brought quite emotionally to tears going through some places. But I'm not going to shy away from it, because this is the truth that I have to actually acknowledge.
Well, and I think that impulse to shy away from the truth then allows people to make political decisions where they are unaware that their political decision is informed by their refusal to acknowledge certain things. And so that, I was reading in a novel yesterday where a character says, of another, she's the worst kind of mean, the kind of person who is mean but does not believe she's mean.
Yeah.
And I think that's, that phenomena of, if I can't, I don't want to see that because it's hard for me to think about,
Yeah.
then allows us to be cruel without thinking about the harm we're causing.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah,
that's where is really healthy.
it's such a passive way of thinking about the world, and turning away from the truth that allows other people to write their own truths, which aren't truths.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
And so that's where you get these falsehoods creeping in all over, and people construct their own histories around things.
Yeah.
it's like when people say, I don't like to talk about politics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or my favorite, why would you let like politics come between you and friends and family, right?
Yeah.
Like we can disagree about politics and still be, no, we can't,
Yeah.
because it's a moral stance.
Yeah.
That one drives, but because they put this, mental divide between it, right?
Right.
I'm okay voting for this person, even though this person belongs to a party that is doing,
That would kill you.
yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but we can still be friends.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
you support my murder like that.
Yeah.
We're not friends.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, you're voting for somebody, for somebody who belongs to a party that believes I should not exist.
Yeah. So
That's,
You can ignore politics, but politics has a way of not ignoring you.
yeah.
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's take our break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask you about how you've been kind of using your platform to speak out in this time. Unrelenting, Book 1 of the Grigori Cycle, was a finalist for the Book Pipeline Awards before it was even published, and it won the New Mexico-Arizona Book Award for LGBTQ fiction. Now, Jess Honnard and Marie Parks are back with Undeniable, the Grigori Cycle Book 2. Bridget has saved her sister Dahlia from imprisonment, but their reunion has come at an enormous cost. Their friend was murdered in the rescue efforts, and Dahlia herself is no longer fully human. As the sisters race to uncover the key to resurrection, Dahlia's former captors pursue them, coveting the ancient powers and seeking justice for their own fallen companions. Multi-Hugo Award-winning author Mary Robinette Kowal called Unrelenting a tapestry of emotion that effortlessly weaves together the threads of grief and obsession. Get your copies of Unrelenting and Undeniable today. Karen Eisenbray's A Quest for Hidden Things tells the story of a self-taught wizard and a healer trying to keep her powers a secret. They have to lift the curse on the small village of Deep River. In the process, they find one another and learn a lot about themselves. Now Eisenbray is back with the second book in the Tales from Deep River series, Deep River Rising. This low-spice, cozy romantasy brings us back to Deep River to explore how some of our other favorite characters deal with the consequences of the curse on their village. Deep River Rising hits store shelves on November 11th, but you can pre-order your copy today. Welcome back, everyone, to Tilting at Windmills. We're here with author Trevor Harrison. And Trevor, when you are in the midst of this era of rising fascism that we are all experiencing, that's global, how have you been pushing back?
Yeah, I'm still, despite being a retired academic, I'm still very much an academic. So I continue to give talks to anyone who wants to, either in universities or in the public. I'm a great believer in that there shouldn't be a wall between academia and the general public. And so I give talks. I still write opinion pieces about politics as it comes up. I'm actually in the media quite a bit, radio, TV. I get interviewed quite often about what is happening, either politics locally or in the province or more widely. And my own writing, books that I'm putting out certainly are very much still political. So there's a light side of me will write kind of things just for the hell of it, just because it's kind of fun. I am just a writer. But at the same time, all of my stuff will actually have a kind of a political tone to it as well. And I think I'll probably continue to do that. The other thing is, of course, I continue to think about, read about, and travel a lot, because I do think travel is a great education. And so coming back from those experiences, I try to, again, provide that kind of information to people out there. So I do my bit. I go out and march in various things. I was out actually in a several protests over the last few weeks, because we've had teachers' strikes here in the province of Alberta. And the government the other day brought down a quite draconian act to actually abolish the capacity of teachers to strike. Quite unheard of, actually. And it's so I think there's going to be lots of fallout from that over the next while, and I'll be continuing to write and march on those things as well.
Yeah. What is the kind of status of that now, or is that still middle of the story?
Well, it's hard to, these stories have a way of continuing even when governments want them to end. So using the hammer to end the strike by saying what is in Canada called the notwithstanding clause, it basically means the government can abrogate the constitutional protections for people to collectively bargain and strike. That doesn't mean it ends there, because there's a lot of people still very incensed, and so people can still go out and march and they can still protest. And I think the fallout for the government is going to continue over the weeks, months, and perhaps years. We'll see how this plays out. Come, of course, the next election here. So people are not happy. The teachers, 50,000 plus, are not happy. And in fact, actually, the last few days since the action took place, students have been out in protest. So students have done walkouts from schools protesting on behalf of the teachers, saying the teachers' complaints about overcrowding, underspending, these are real and it's affecting our education. So good for them, because these students are in a couple of years going to be also voters.
And that's there's this criticism sometimes of protests where the kind of some people see a protest and say the next day I didn't see any legislative change, therefore this was all a waste.
Yeah.
And the point I always want to remind people is it's kind of like recycling. Like the data on recycling is that recycling doesn't actually produce a lot of environmental benefit, but it changes your behavior. And
Yeah.
so once you are involved in recycling, you're more likely to vote for people who care about, actually setting policies that will make a huge difference. And I think the same is true of those kinds of protests. Those students will remember. I stood with my teachers, I walked out with my friends, we oppose this, and that will change their voting patterns for a generation.
Think just, and we have lots of historical antecedents for this. Think of the civil rights movement in the United States. Everybody thinks about it as something that started in the 1960s. No,
Yeah.
it started in the 1940s into the 1950s. A lot of people paid the price with their lives, but it started as a movement. And so little things, building community, building connections with other people who are like-minded and actually see what's going on, that's how you get movements going. And so the smallest little pebble in the ocean has a capacity to spread out from there. And so I see that as very much what's going on here, not just in Alberta around the teachers' strikes, but other incidents around the world as well, including what's going on in the States, what's going on in the UK around the attempts to suppress pro-Palestinian marches, what's going on in Spain actually, which is a really interesting phenomenon, the Spanish government in terms of this. These are small, non-violent actions that are going to have a result, I think, down the road.
Yeah.
Well, and so much of what the right-wing media does and does remarkably well is overwhelm people with chaos and information and misinformation.
Yeah.
So that so much gets lost. There's just, it's no longer the 24-hour news cycle. It's the, 20-minute news cycle
Yeah.
now. So it's hard to figure out what to pay attention to, what to focus your attention and energy on. So what is something that you wish people were paying more attention to right now?
Yeah, I think, well, to back up from that a little bit, Nakudo actually to you, with podcasts, small publishing and everything. I think actually the way out of this, we're seeing actually the path forwards. People think about the big media, and the big media is very powerful, tons and tons of money.
Hmm.
Money actually is, we actually have to get hold of the fact there's way too much big money sloshing around in very few pockets around the world. But big media actually is in more crisis than we would think. So they control an awful lot of things. Think about all the, especially the television networks in the
Yeah.
States, but the print media elsewhere and all over. It's small broadcasts, small publishers who are, I think, making those avenues, those inroads. And a lot of young people are turning away from the big
Yeah.
press, the big media. That's the way that our message is actually going to get out there. So if you actually look at the finances of a lot of the big press media, they're
Yes.
actually not in great shape. They're
No.
actually losing money. And one of the reasons their way of dealing with this is they're laying off people like crazy. They're hoping that technology will save them because there's
Yeah.
fewer costs in terms of people. People cost money. So what you do is you have, like, for example, on a lot of radio broadcasts, they run the same kind of thing over and over and over again, and they have kind of automated broadcasts. And if you go to TV, you see the same stories running over and over and over. It's cheap, but people don't care about that. It's cheap, but it's uninteresting.
Yeah.
so
They
so
put it,
our way forward is actually for small print, small media, small broadcasters, small publishers to make those inroads, because that's where people are actually finding some explanation for what's going on out there.
yeah.
And I think that's actually going to be our salvation down the road.
Yeah, well, and especially I think the AI bubble, one of the things that threatens it, because I agree, the big five, these major media corporations, I always say to folks, they have a lot of lights to keep on. Like they
Yeah,
are that, yes, they're very large institutions, but they're fragile.
yeah,
Because if they don't make an immediate quarterly profit, they disappear. Like, they are, it's a fragile model. And if people start to say, for me, it's not about, reading the next book. It's about having a relationship with that human being. Or
Yeah.
similarly, I want to listen on the radio to someone who lives in my town, who I feel some human connection with. There's
Mhm.
there's no cheap way around that. And I think those big media companies will have cut themselves to the bone, and then they're going to find out this is not what people want. They want to, and our kid watches a lot of YouTube,
Mm.
and they come back to these producers of YouTube videos because they have these kind of parallel, what do they call those relationships? Parasocial
Parasocial.
relationships, where they feel
Mhm.
like I know this
Yeah.
person well. And that's not something you can replace with AI or with, one broadcaster broadcasting to lots of places. Like they want to feel that connection. And I have hope, that is going to be the model is, maybe smaller audiences, but a deeper connection.
Well, and I think I mean, I suspect that's one of the pushes behind Trump's whole thing with TikTok being under American ownership. I think the fear of the Chinese government having our information was a facade to cover up the very real fear, because just a few weeks before all that started, the news article had come out saying that TikTok had surpassed Google as the number one search engine for age like 17 to 24.
That's where they're
That's
going for
where
information now.
that's where younger kids are going for their information and their news. And TikTok changed their monetary platform to actually like monetize more people that were doing long form, 10-minute plus journalism reports through TikTok. And that terrifies the American government.
Right.
That very
I
notion.
I think I mean I don't want to be overly positive also about a lot of the new media.
Yeah.
I do think what we need everywhere is people who are actually critical thinkers. So
Yeah.
it's just as is possible to
Yeah.
manipulate TikTok or
Oh
other
yeah.
kinds of new media. And one of the things about human beings is we are prone to being influenced by visuals over reading. And
Yeah.
so I see that a lot now is that you throw up a few visuals and the right does it as well.
Yeah.
Think, for example, the images right now of chaos in Portland, and it's taken from a visual, some
It's
film that
one
was
city
done in
block.
Yeah.
2020, but
Right.
you throw it up there and people are, so we do need to be more critical of this. But there's a lot of interesting stuff going on.
Yeah.
I think the AI illusion, we could do a whole program about
Right.
AI. I'm extremely critical of it and what it is being sold to us as
Yeah.
doing. It's totally an illusion. It
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
but it masks the fact that real people are actually putting stuff in there, and we're imagining that this computer is actually coming up with new knowledge. It's not.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
and it's
regenerating stuff that human beings put in there.
Yeah, well, I always
People don't
remind people
understand that.
it's trying to pass the Turing test. And so it is designed not to be interesting, not to be exceptional. It is aiming for as absolutely average as it possibly can. So if you are a student
Exactly.
there who is trying to write a term paper, say to yourself, do I want to be the most average I can be? Then ChatGPT is the way to go because ChatGPT wants to trick a person into thinking it's a person, not an exceptional
It's
person.
yeah.
And so,
exactly. And I've been telling people about this. What the AI does, it's actually a super version of what we've done in social sciences for decades. What we do is collect a lot of data, and you do variables, and you do regression equations, and you come up with what is the standard norm.
yes.
But
Mhm.
it's at the end of the bell curve is the interesting stuff. What AI is doing is going over the universe of data and saying, here is the normative projection.
Right.
That's not creative and it's nothing new. It's
Yeah.
people are being fooled about what this machine is doing, but human beings are still inputting it. And the old saying about shit in, shit out, if there's a lot of crap going into your projections, the problem is we start to imagine that the computer is actually generating something new. And we also lose the capacity to track backwards to find how the data was generated in the
Right.
first place. And so we lose who is actually and what is actually putting the information in. That's the real danger around AI.
Yeah. Well, I read this piece by this computer scientist that was really fascinating, where you can graph the quantity of, just words, as numbers that are produced on the internet that come from AI rather than human beings. And the
Yeah.
graph kind of over time, the amount that was produced by Chat GPT stealing them from humans rather than human original work kind of tracks across, and then they cross for the first time during COVID. And
Yeah.
then they spaced out again, and it was still slightly more human work than it was Chat GPT kind of garbage. And now it's flipped, and it is exponential. Because if you're a company, why produce one chat bot that tries to sell your product when you can produce 100?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so well, now this theorist was saying these algorithms cannot distinguish, and
Mhm.
so they are learning from their own garbage.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
her point was the output is just going to get the assumption was this was a good investment because these machines were going to get better and better, and now they're just going to get worse and worse because they're only feeding on their own slop. So it's going to
Oh,
be interesting to see.
I found a Twitter thread the other day, that within the comments there were like there was a string of like 300 comments between two bot accounts that were arguing
Arguing with one
with each
another.
other, but they were
yeah.
making the exact same point. Like they were both
Yeah.
arguing the exact same point and like repeating each other.
Yeah.
Like there was this like specific order in which they're supposed to make these arguments without taking into account there's no, acknowledgement of what the
Yeah.
other bot account was writing. And it
No,
was
I
so
heard a very
hilarious.
funny variation on this where apparently people can set up bots to respond on dating apps.
Yeah.
And the hilarious circumstances is where a person finally opens theirs up after they've done this and finds that the other person also had a bot. And so the two bots have been carrying on a long conversation that's nonsense.
Mhm.
And you have to wonder how much of what is going on that is being produced, by these bots is conversing with other bots and they're unaware. So,
The more
You know,
terrifying, the more
both
terrifying.
of you have actually confirmed exactly what I've been saying for 6 months, a year now, is that again, as I said, the what AI is going to do is it will search the universe for information that is out there. But among the information that is out there, what it is actually produced. And so you're absolutely right. We're going to keep regressing to the norm, and the only real creativity appears at each end. There's already actually stories coming out about how the mistakes that AI is making too. There's lawsuits pending actually in terms of some things. For example, I understand number of projections in the United States around um, what should be done in terms of health issues, operations, projections about what is unhealthy with this person.
Yeah.
uh, the only creativity that can still actually happen is human beings at either end of that bell curve. And so that's what we have to actually hold on to. But AI is a real threat here. And, somehow governments and people, corporations even have to start paying attention to that. Another little side note here is in terms of and I'm a great follower of pop culture, and so I watch TV probably more than I should, and I listen to music all the time. What strikes me about a lot of music, pop music, is how really redundant and ordinary, and because it used to be corporations years ago said, hey, this is the sound that sells well. Well, AI has just magnified that. I don't know how many more Taylor Swifts we need out there, which is not to say she may not be, creative in their own right, but you can see we're going to have an awful lot more of Taylor Swifts because this is what sells. And
right.
the machine says this sells.
Well, and does the machine even say it sells? I mean, this is the kind of irony of this is if the value is measured in listens or views or whatever,
Right.
but the
Right.
AI can't even tell if it's a person or a robot doing the listening or viewing. It starts to go, this is popular among the
Yeah.
humans, and it is listening
Yeah.
to itself and then producing work that it deceived itself into thinking was popular. So that, yeah,
And, and what is so striking about so much in terms of movies and television and music is how really boring a lot of it is
yeah,
now.
yep, yeah,
I mean, some people have commented about apparently AI is writing scripts for Netflix.
yeah,
And a number of reviewers looking at it says, you can tell that AI actually produced this because it's such a boring story.
yeah. I heard
And
from some
even the
actors who were
visuals.
saying they feel like they're having to read lines that are painfully expositional because the
Yeah.
assumption, yeah, I think you were telling me about this, that the assumption is that people aren't actually going to
Yeah.
be watching. They're going to be doing something else. And so the
Yeah.
script has to be written in such a
Mhm.
way that it's for the lowest common denominator. But who's making that decision? I wonder to what extent that's because the people who are looking at the data are looking at bad data because they're
Yeah.
saying AI pays attention barely to this thing, and we
Yeah.
can't distinguish whether that's humans or people, or robots listening, but this one is getting views. It's popular. Well, who determined that it's popular? And now real human beings, actors, are having to say these painfully, like
Painfully
ridiculous lines. What
mundane.
I
Yes.
would never write. We would go, that's the worst line. Nobody speaks that way. And yet it's got to be there to telegraph that to an audience.
Well, and I
It's
was I was reading that article. I was reading an article about that. It was a review of the second season of Andor.
Mm,
Because I don't know if you've watched Andor or not. Particularly the second season, so much of what is happening, because it's really I mean, it's a spy
yeah,
thriller,
thriller,
right?
political
But
thriller.
so much of what is happening on screen is unspoken.
It's demanding. You
And
have to pay
so
attention.
you have to, there's, just a look between two characters. And
mm,
then 2 episodes later, that character is dead, and that look tells you why. I had to go back and rewatch
Yeah.
a specific scene because I had missed it. And
mm,
so this guy was writing a review about particularly one episode in the second season, but the second season overall, and talking about what Andor did so well was they wrote a show for people that were actually going to watch the screen
Right.
instead of people that are going to be everything has to be said.
Yeah.
Everything has to be verbalized because people are doing the dishes or cooking dinner
yeah.
or
You're
scrolling on
on
the
your
internet
cell
at the same
phone
time.
and yeah,
Yeah.
texting. Yeah.
And that was one of the best things about Andor was so much of what was happening, so much of the context,
Yeah.
if you're not directly watching every moment of it. And because we're in this time of fast media, fast everything,
Yeah.
there are so few, like, people are losing the actual ability, myself included,
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
sit through an hour show without picking up your phone. And I include myself
Oh
in
yeah,
this.
where you're,
Yeah.
finding,
And
but
and
when we
and
do,
me
it is
too.
more rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And me too, though. And my wife will regularly say, "Are you paying attention to the show?" And I'll find myself on my iPad or on the cell
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah.
It is really bad, and attention deficit. It's actually our machinery is actually creating that. There's a lot of literature about how it's affecting young people in school, and so some of the moves, for example, to take away cell phones so you can't have them during school time. I can see the logic of that actually. So we're losing the capacity to sit still and concentrate and pay attention to what's going on around us. Again, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, this also plays into the capacity for new right, extreme right movements in
Mhm.
governments to distract us
Yeah.
Yeah.
from what's really important out there. We suddenly are not paying attention to anything.
Well, especially if what is,
Things go in an instance. Yeah.
yeah, and especially if the real solutions, as they so often are complex and nuanced.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you've got folks who are saying, I demand something that fits on a bumper sticker,
Yeah.
the real
No.
solutions often won't,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as folks are going into their week, what is your advice for people as they're, hearing this show and going into their week coming up?
Yeah, I guess following what we just said here, pay attention, and sort out, prioritize what is really important in your life. Is this thing that is occupying so much of your attention really important? Does it make a difference in your life, or is this the most transient thing? It's pop cultural references or something. Did you really need to know about that person? Someone dies and you're saying, I never heard of that person before, but you have to go down a rabbit hole and read about them now. Is this important to your life? The other thing is again, we talked about just a while ago, is be really critical. Think about when you're being told something, try to track back where that information came from. Did this person have, a legitimate bit of evidence for the argument that they're making here? And finally, maybe to quote from that television series years ago, House, everybody lies. so, but some lies are far more egregious than others. Some are just kind of trying to cover, save face and save your pride. But pay attention to that. That's not bad advice at all.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much for being on. This was great.
Thank
That's
you.
really enjoyed it. Have a great day.
You too.